Hello. I wanted to get on today to share a few ideas, ponderings, explorations, and what I've been feeling lately is that, it's funny how there's lots of things that the inner mindscape can focus on, like we were speaking about in the last video. There's lots of things that we can focus on, but underneath it all, there's always this desire to experience something different, or at least for me. And I think it's that inner dopamine craze response of just searching for something that brings invigoration, something that is unique. But it's like that process will trigger a perpetual process of control. An idea that, I've learned this before, I know how this went before, so I need to lead things into a better, more favorable result. And that illusion of control that comes is a funny thing because, as we know, there's never really that great of an amount of actual control that any one of us creators really has. I mean, we're really just to the whims of fate or coincidence or chaos, whatever it is that we feel just occurred, depending on whether or not we feel satisfied or disappointed, But I think that there is something to be said about igniting a greater amount of allowance that constantly says, I'm in agreement with the things that are unfolding, regardless of how they make my earth self feel. And I think that over time it's possible to cultivate a recognition of, just almost from an objective point of view, from higher in your mindscape, or just like that higher self that's in you. Not that you are like intuitively connecting with your higher self. Like, I think that's kind of like a whole separate thing that could be delved into, but like, because of how connecting with the higher self can be seen as and thought of as being difficult, I think that sometimes we just have to ignore that and just be like, look, there's just a higher me that's watching. There's nothing special about it, but there's a part of me that can be completely objective. And this part of me is kind of like just the listener and the collector. And as you go through these experiences, there's the you that's interacting, and there might even be the you that's judging, or that feels upset at times, or that has desires. But then I almost want to like provoke a sense of understanding that says like there's even another you that is never drawing any conclusions. If you can create a sense of purity in a sector of your being to where you say nothing can, what's that word for when something taints something, it's nothing can really touch this and bring the disappointment of what's occurring into this portion of my being. This part of my being is just here. It's just now. Whether or not that part of our being actually has guidance for us I almost feel like we over time just need to let that be not even a part of it, so that we can just practice creating a portion of our being that is objectively there, that is just aware. And that way you don't have to be caught up in the evaluation of whether or not your mind is getting in the way, but to just know that that other portion of your being is not your mind. It is not even limited by your mind. It is just a portion of your being that is just here at all times. It is unbreachable. It is unlimitable. It is unblockable. And so over time, I feel as though that portion of your being can gain a sense of, I don't want to say momentum, because momentum would kind of come to say that that portion of our being is it gains power or force, or that it could maybe roll out of control. But it's like that portion of your being can accumulate a sense of awareness that, some people call it the part of you that holds space for yourself. I get so kind of like, I don't know, the whole holding space thing, I think, I'm here to redefine that, because we need something that's practical out of that. And this is kind of how it feels for me, is that, I would love to just have a part of my being that's constantly giving me higher knowledge, right? Like that's what, over time through spiritual practice, like sometimes the ego is just like, cool, I want to be super special, super intuitive all the time, super connected all the time. And that's, it's a fun feeling and desire. It is what makes us go further, in our spiritual practice, or in our drive for a better self, and accessing something higher or better. All of these things are good things to cherish within your being, and there's just a process that we have to know will be a part of it, that is around the ideals of humbling yourself along the way. But it kind of gets difficult when you are focused on both trying to attain higher forms of yourself, to do better and to feel good and feel like you're connected, but to also be constantly trying to like humble that part of yourself because that it's kind of just your ego accidentally becoming, self-involved. And it's just, at a certain point you almost just give up after a certain while of wondering like what is my best spiritual practice, and that like over time certain things hold out and certain things don't, but like overall, like you feel like you're a really spiritual person, but sometimes you don't really feel like you have that one thing, that one tangible thing that you could lay claim to in your physical environment, of like how you're being dedicated to carving out yourself, right? And then, we of course at the same time, we know that we don't need that, it's just an inner love, right? It's just a unconditional love, or just a connection to that beauty, right? But at the same time, there's just that hunger, to be active in doing more than just the mundane 3D things. So this portion of our being that or rather, let me say this better, the part of us that feels spiritual even when we're not, it's because we do feel connected to something that's more divine, and that's the portion of our being that's always there. That's the portion of our being that's always watching and care and love. And over time, as you can lay recognition to these things of what is within you, what is functioning that you may not know about, that is there to support you, it's really helpful to create these imaginary mechanisms to understand all the things that you are actually accomplishing that have nothing to do with the physical accomplishments. And, it's hard when I don't know if you're anything like me, but maybe this is just a good example for something that you do experience. But for me, it's like, it's funny how I have a great sense of drive to be successful, but it's silly because when I contemplate the ideas of how the rest of the world sees success, that's such a medial, just insurmountable thing. I might be using my words wrong, by the way. Sometimes when I get, off track with like orating, I will literally use a word in the opposite way. So I'm just gonna let you know that now. Listen to my heart more than my words sometimes. But what I'm trying to say is, I think that our eye can get wrapped up in the references of what other people find passion in, and then just misconstrue that as what I'm also passionate for, because I'm so involved in the world, right? And that's like, we're all involved in the world. Those are like the things that we interact with, the things that we see on social media, and the things that other people have drive for. All those things so easily show up as worldly things. Like, that is the main thing that this world can show, is worldly things. So that ends up getting wrapped up into our being as being like, oh yeah, that's how I can find, like a measure of like accomplishment and progress, productivity is in the same things that these other people do. And so because of that, it's almost like my dopamine response, my internal gauges are being calibrated to what everybody else calibrates their own to. And so in the end, I'll catch myself being like, oh man, I'm so disappointed about how such and such hasn't happened yet. And it's like, I would challenge you and us to view these and recognize these other huge accomplishments that are maybe not visible to that naked eye. You might be at war with your ancestral self. You might be engrossed in your phobias. You might be tantalized by the premonitions of your being for what's coming ahead. There's a lot of things that the inner being is actively engaged in, but also actively creating subconsciously. And we are at the whim of all of it, we are totally involved in more than just what we can see. And sometimes we just have to give ourselves credit for what we are alchemizing. So over time, start to cultivate a recognition for the parts of you that are just fully, oh man, how do I describe it? Anchored in your source being, that are just present, watching and knowing that everything that is unveiling within you and without you are and is total and utter beauty, utter perfection. Because the more that I, quotes, hold space for the way that my being leads me to the answers or leads me to the next thing that brings me joy or that brings the antidote to my pain, all I really have to do is just set my intention. And in the end, all of a sudden, it's almost like it's impossible for my intentions to either not get an answer, or impossible for them to not be fully fulfilled. And what I mean by that is that my intentions will either be shown to be false or not of my true self, and then I get steered onto the right path, or my intentions will be fulfilled no matter what. And that's just a fancy way of saying that all intentions get fulfilled. And it brings a sense of power back into what your intentions really are. And if you tuned a part of your intentions to not being so just lofty, things that are hard to reach, but rather to tune your intentions to the things that you can reach, such as, I want to focus on the part of my being that is fully and unconditionally, purely here, present, and resoundingly accepting. Even if I feel like I can't reach a state of acceptance all the time, there is a portion in me that is, or else I'd be dead, So that type of intention can go a lot further and bring a lot more, and it's tuned to a sense of divine success that really is waiting to be untapped. And there's you need to get in line with being the grand master of your own chess game. If I was a being looking into a human life, obviously I wouldn't just say, hey, it's so much easier than you're making it. Let yourself handle things the hard way. Let yourself go through things the hard way if you can't tap how to break out of that. None of us do. But then in the times where you have peace, clarity, just time to yourself, or just when you're excited, or just ask for that higher grand master to come in, because there's something in you that knows the antidotes and the tips and the tricks, because you have been through every life in the universe. And you can tap into any life in the universe. You created all of this. So you're not going to be able to logic the key, but know that the key is in you, and you can tune yourself to that recognition of where it is and that it's watching at all times. And that's when the way of the Tao just has to come forward. You have to just open and know that you are there, being the orchestrator in the best ways possible. Thank you so much for listening with me today as we listen together about things that can activate our higher prowess.